Ladies and gentlemen, imagine you received a personal message from God. It doesn't come in thunder. It doesn't split the skies. It comes quietly. 4 simple words appear before you. Please watch this video. And then a date, April 8, 2025. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why this date? Why this message? What does it mean? But what if I told you? It's not about the video. It's about the moment you're in right now. Because sometimes God doesn't speak to us through burning bushes anymore. He speaks through timing, through patterns, through that strange whisper you feel deep inside your gut when everything feels loud, chaotic, and out of control. The invitation to pause. Imagine for a moment that life is a highway. Everyone is speeding. Everyone has somewhere to be, something to prove, someone to impress. The world teaches us to move fast, faster than ever before. We wake up, check our phones before we even say good morning to the person next to us. We chase the next goal, the next post, the next validation. And in this race, we rarely stop to ask the question that matters most. Why? Now imagine, while you're driving 80 miles an hour down that highway of life, you see a sign, not just any sign, a sign that feels like it was written just for you, and it reads, God said, please watch this video before April 8, 2025. Now pause, because that's what this moment is really about. It's not about watching a video, it's about stopping long enough to realize that maybe, just maybe, you've been moving so fast that you've lost sight of what really matters. See, when God says, please watch this, He's not issuing a command like a dictator. He's offering an invitation, a whisper, a moment of grace. He's asking you to pause, not because you're in trouble, but because you're important. Because you're running so fast, you might miss something sacred. In my work, I've learned that the most powerful people aren't the ones who shout the loudest or hustle the hardest. They're the ones who know when to stop, when to breathe, when to listen. Because stillness isn't weakness, it's strength under control. When God gives us a date, like April 8, 2025, we often want to know why that day. What's going to happen? Is it a warning, a prophecy, a deadline? But I think it's more beautiful than that. What if God, knowing how distracted the world would be, how overwhelmed we would become, chose a date simply to grab your attention? Not because something bad is coming, but because something good is waiting. Because the truth is, the most important days of our lives aren't the ones when everything is loud and dramatic. They're the quiet days when something deep within us finally wakes up. When we pause long enough to hear what we've been avoiding, when we realize we're not alone even in our silence. So what if April 8 is not about fear, but about focus? What if it's a reminder to reconnect with who you were before the world told you who to be? What if it's God's way of saying, hey, I miss you, let's talk? Not through a sermon, not through guilt, but through presence. I've sat with CEOs who built empires and still felt empty. I've met college students who thought they had no purpose only to realize they were full of potential. And in every story, the turning point wasn't when they got more, it was when they paused. When they paused, when they listened, when they accepted the invitation to slow down. Because when you pause, something incredible happens. You start to hear again. You hear your own soul. You hear the quiet convictions that you've buried under performance. And if you listen carefully, you might even hear God. So maybe that's what this message is about. Not just watching a video, but stepping out of the noise long enough to remember you were created on purpose, for a purpose. The world may rush you, but God always invites you. And today He's simply saying, pause. Before April 8, 2025, not because it's the end, but because it might just be your beginning. The whisper behind the noise. We live in a world where noise is constant. Notifications, deadlines, expectations, opinions. It's all coming at us all the time. And somewhere in the middle of all this noise, there is a whisper. It's subtle, gentle, so quiet that most people miss it, but it's always there. That whisper is your soul. That whisper is God. You see, we often expect divine moments to be dramatic fireworks, lightning, a voice from the sky. But if you study the lives of people who found their purpose, you'll realize something. The most life-changing revelations rarely come with applause. They come in stillness, in the quiet spaces between the chaos. When your heart finally stops trying to perform and just begins to listen. God doesn't need to shout. He's not in a hurry. His voice doesn't compete with the world's noise. It waits for you to turn it down. So many of us are searching for clarity. We think we'll find it in success, in relationships, in getting everything just right. But clarity doesn't live out there. It lives in here, inside, buried under layers of noise, fear, distraction, and performance. That's why God is whispering, because He knows you're tired of pretending, tired of comparing, tired of chasing something that keeps moving further away. So He whispers because He wants to draw you closer. And here's the thing, God's whisper is never random. It's specific, intentional, tailored to your journey. That feeling you've been ignoring, that thought that keeps coming back even when you try to shake it, that quiet nudge in your chest that says, there's more to life than this. That's the whisper. But the world has taught us to doubt it, to silence it, to move on quickly and scroll past it. Because if we sit with it too long, we might realize we've been living on autopilot. We might have to change. We might have to confront the truth that we've built an entire life that doesn't reflect who we really are. And that truth is uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. Because the moment you begin to recognize the whisper, you start to reclaim your life. I've met people who had everything, money, status, influence, and they were still empty. Why? Because they ignored the whisper. They listened to the noise instead. They played by the rules of the world and forgot the call of their soul. But I've also met people who had very little, yet they were free. Why? Because they chose to listen, to get quiet, to trust the whisper even when it didn't make sense. God speaks in patterns, in timing, in stillness. And that whisper you feel, the one that won't go away, it's not just inspiration, it's instruction. It's God's way of gently saying, come back to who you really are. Come back to me. So if you're feeling restless, that's not a problem, it's a signal. If you're feeling lost, that's not failure, it's direction. Restlessness is often the whisper trying to get your attention. We live in a society that rewards speed, but God is not in a rush. He cares more about depth than pace, about roots, not just results. And that whisper right now is not asking you to do more, it's asking you to become more, to return to your essence, to stop numbing, to stop running, to stop proving, and to start listening. The whisper behind the noise has been waiting, and the question is, will you listen before April 2025? Not because something bad will happen if you don't, but because something beautiful might finally begin if you do. Let the moment you were made for. There comes a moment in every person's life when they sense something bigger than themselves. It's not just a feeling, it's a knowing. It may come in a quiet walk, a midnight prayer, a deep breath after heartbreak, or even a simple phrase like, please watch this before April 8, 2025. And in that moment, everything shifts. Not because your circumstances change, but because your awareness does. See, we spend so much of our lives trying to prepare for the future, We plan, we build, we hustle, we sacrifice. But there's one thing we often forget to prepare for: the moment we were created for. The moment when everything that didn't make sense suddenly does. We often think our purpose will arrive with fanfare, that the meaning of life will knock on our door and introduce itself with certainty. But it rarely works that way. Purpose doesn't come when you feel strong. It shows up when you feel weak, when you're unsure, when you're on your knees asking God, what now? Because purpose doesn't scream, it reveals itself, layer by layer, choice by choice. And right now, maybe you're not where you thought you'd be. Maybe you've been through things that shattered your plans, broke your confidence, or left you doubting everything. But what if I told you none of it was wasted? What if the pain was part of the preparation? What if every tear, every delay, every door that closed was leading you to this moment? Because you see, the moment you were made for doesn't come when life is perfect. It comes when you're finally ready to see clearly, to let go of the image, to embrace the truth, to admit that the way you've been living isn't sustainable and something deeper is calling you. And that call, it's divine. It's the intersection of your soul and God's timing. It's not about what you do for a living. It's about what makes you come alive. The moment you were made for is not a spotlight. It's not a stage. It's not applause. It's surrender. It's when you say, I don't want to chase anymore. I want to live with meaning. I want to hear God again. I want to remember why I was created in the first place. And suddenly life slows down. Suddenly the urgency you once felt to prove yourself fades away because you realize something eternal is happening. You realize you're standing on holy ground, not in a church, but in your own heart. God never created you to just survive. He created you to reflect His image, His love, His purpose, His wisdom. And maybe, just maybe, this moment, this very moment, is the one where your spirit begins to align with that truth. People ask, how do I know I've stepped into the moment I was made for? It's simple. Peace replaces pressure. Purpose replaces confusion. Conviction replaces comparison. And love, not fear, starts to guide your choices. It doesn't mean everything becomes easy, but it does mean everything becomes clear. This is the gift of alignment. When your heart, your values, your time, and your voice begin to move in one direction towards something greater than yourself. And maybe that's what April 8th, 2025 is about. Not a deadline, but a doorway. Not a warning, but a wake-up. Not an ending, but an invitation to step into the moment you were always meant for. Ready for step 4, or want this one translated into Urdu for deeper emotional resonance? Just say the word. The power of alignment over achievement. For most of our lives, we're told that achievement is the goal. Achieve more, do more, become more. From an early age, we're rewarded for results, grades, trophies, promotions, applause, and somewhere along the way, we begin to believe that our worth is directly tied to our accomplishments. We start climbing ladders without asking where they lead. We measure progress in titles and timelines, and when we don't hit those milestones, we feel like we've failed. But let me ask you something. Have you ever reached a goal and still felt empty? That's the dangerous illusion of achievement without alignment. Because achievement without purpose is like running at full speed in the wrong direction. You move fast, but you don't go deep. You get applause, but you lose your soul. And the scariest part? You look successful to the world, but you feel like a stranger to yourself. That's why God is calling so many of us back, not to stop achieving, but to start aligning. Alignment is when your actions match your values, when your decisions reflect your deepest beliefs, when you stop living for likes and start living for legacy. It's when the noise outside of you doesn't drown out the truth inside of you. And here's the paradox. Alignment often looks like less on the outside, but feels like more on the inside. It means saying no to opportunities that don't match your purpose. It means choosing peace over popularity. It means slowing down, not because you're lazy, but because you refuse to keep building what you no longer believe in. Alignment requires courage because it demands honesty. And honesty is hard when you've built an identity around being the achiever, the strong one, the one who always has it together. But what if your greatest breakthrough isn't in achieving more, but in realigning your life with what actually matters? What if that quiet feeling inside of you, the one that says something's off, isn't a threat, but a signal? What if it's God's way of realigning you before April 8, 2025? Not to scare you, but to save you from a life that looks full, but feels hollow. Alignment brings clarity. It simplifies your decisions. It frees you from needing constant approval. Because when you're aligned with purpose, you stop chasing success and start serving significance. You stop asking, what will they think? And start asking, what is right for my soul? You stop performing and start living. This shift changes everything. Relationships get deeper. Work becomes more meaningful. Even pain feels purposeful. Because now you're not just existing, you're embodying who you were created to be. And maybe that's what this message is really about. Maybe God isn't asking you to do more before April 8th. Maybe He's inviting you to come back into alignment, to look at your life not just by how much you've done, but how true you've been to who you really are. Because the truth is, you can achieve everything and still miss the point. But when you're aligned, even the smallest step becomes sacred. And when your heart, your mind, and your spirit move in the same direction, you no longer need to be the loudest in the room. Your peace will speak for you. This is the shift from pressure to purpose, from success to significance, from striving to surrendering. And this is where everything begins to change. When obedience feels like sacrifice but leads to freedom, there's a moment in everyone's life when they are asked to do something that doesn't make sense, not by the world, but by their spirit. A moment when obedience doesn't feel logical. It feels costly. It feels like a sacrifice. Maybe it's walking away from a relationship that no longer honors who you are. Maybe it's leaving a job that drains your soul. Maybe it's saying yes to a calling you've tried to avoid. And in that moment, the question is not, what will this cost me? The real question is, what will it cost me if I don't? Because obedience, true obedience, always feels uncomfortable at first. It asks you to trust without full understanding. It invites you to move before you have all the answers. And it stretches your faith further than your comfort zone will ever allow. We've been taught that obedience is about following rules, about compliance, about losing autonomy. But that's a shallow view. Real obedience is not about submission, it's about alignment with a higher rhythm, a rhythm that's been guiding you all along, a rhythm that knows more about your future than your fear does. Obedience feels like letting go of control. And that's terrifying, because control makes us feel safe even when we're stuck. But God never promised safety. He promised purpose. He promised presence. He promised peace. Not the kind the world gives, but the kind that holds your soul together even when everything else feels like it's falling apart. And here's the beautiful paradox. Obedience feels like sacrifice in the beginning, but on the other side of it is freedom. Not just freedom from external things, but freedom within. The kind of freedom that lets you sleep at night. The kind of freedom that silences the voice of comparison. The kind of freedom that makes you feel whole again. Because when you obey the quiet promptings, the ones no one else understands, you're not being reckless, you're being real, You're being led. And what could be more powerful than that? Sometimes God will ask you to walk away from things other people would die for. Not because those things are bad, but because they're not yours, they're not your assignment, they're not your path. And that's hard to accept, especially when you've invested time, energy, and identity into them. But the cost of disobedience is subtle. It doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it just looks like stagnation, like living a life that's technically fine, but spiritually flat. So many people are stuck, not because they lack opportunity, but because they lack obedience. They know what they need to do. They've felt the nudge. They've heard the whisper, but the fear of the unknown keeps them anchored to what's familiar. But here's the truth. Everything great in life is on the other side of obedience. Peace is on the other side. Clarity is on the other side. A new beginning is on the other side. And sometimes all God needs is one yes, one act of obedience, one decision to say, I don't know how this ends, but I trust who's asking. So maybe April 8, 2025 isn't just a date. Maybe it's a line in the sand, a spiritual checkpoint, a divine moment where God is whispering, before this day, choose obedience, choose alignment, choose freedom. Because what you're being asked to do may not make sense now, but it's leading you to the kind of life you were always meant to live. And when you finally step into it, you'll realize it was never really a sacrifice. It was always an invitation.